Well, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Liz Cole, and I'm the director of U of M's National Center for Institutional Diversity. I'm so glad to see all of you here today for the James S. Jackson Distinguished Career Award for Diversity Scholarship Lecture and Award presentation. And I would also like to welcome all of you who are joining us virtually today. We at NCID are thrilled to be hosting this event in partnership with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I want to take a moment to thank all of the staff of both of our units who have worked so hard for months to make this event such a wonderful day as it's been. So thank you. Today we're here to honor and celebrate Dr. Robert Sellers as the recipient of the biennial James S. Jackson Distinguished Career Award for Diversity Scholarship. Joining us today are some special guests who you'll hear from during the course of this event. And of course, we're all looking forward to hearing from Dr. Sellers himself. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Michigan is located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people. In 1817, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations made the largest single land transfer to the University of Michigan. This was offered ceremonially through the treaty at the foot of the rapids so that their children could be educated. Through these words of acknowledgement, the nation's contemporary and ancestral ties to the land and their contributions to the university are renewed and reaffirmed. This award and program would not be possible without support from the offices of the president and the provost. And so I'm very pleased that we're joined today by Dr. Lori McCauley. Dr. McCauley is Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University of Michigan. Prior to her appointment as Provost, she served as the Dean of the School of Dentistry. She is the William K. and Marianne Najar Professor of Periodontics in the Dental School and Professor of Pathology in the Medical School. An active researcher, she's been supported by the National Institutes of Health for more than 25 years. She's a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science and a member of the National Academy of Medicine. Dr. McCauley has chaired the Department of Periodontics and Oral Medicine, and she has led campus work focused on fundraising for interdisciplinary activities, and she was also deeply engaged in pandemic planning. She's been a champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, having received the Ida Gray Award for her outstanding efforts in promoting multicultural ideals. So now I'd like to invite Provost McCauley to the podium.
Thank you, Professor Cole, and welcome on behalf of the university. This is like one of my favorite spaces on this campus. I love this space, and it brings so many fond memories to me of celebratory events. And today, we're celebrating Rob Sellers, really a giant in his field, but also one of the kindest, most generous people on our campus. So, Rob, my congratulations up front, and thank you for your long-term leadership on our campus. I too want to thank everyone in the National Center for Institutional Diversity and our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for making today's celebration possible. My appreciation also goes out to ODE for the release of our Year 1 Progress Report for DEI 2.0, which provides a tangible evidence of what DEI means in practice and the opportunities it creates, which is especially crucial at a time when these things are contested. So thank you, ODE. As the report makes clear, there's a good reason that our academic values like integrity and innovation are buttressed by diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our mission to be the defining public university hinges on our realization of these ideals. Throughout the history of our university, we've been proud to be the home of scholars who have advanced our understanding of one another and of the enormous benefits of diversity. In 2017, the university established a career award to celebrate and honor faculty whose scholarship has contributed significantly to our understanding or appreciation of groups that have been traditionally understudied or misstudied in the Academy. The James S. Jackson Distinguished Career Award for Diversity Scholarship advances one of our overarching DEI strategies, supporting innovative and inclusive scholarship and teaching. This award is named after its inaugural recipient, James S. Jackson, whose career epitomized the type of dedication and accomplishment that we envisioned in founding the award. Dr. Jackson served as the director of the Institute for Social Research at the university from 2005 to 2015, and I had the good fortune to overlap with him for a couple years when I was dean on the academic program group. Dr. Jackson played an instrumental role in the life of ISR over his long and illustrious career. He was a giant in the social sciences, producing a steady stream of path-breaking research and training generations of social science researchers. Dr. James' leadership roles spanned not only the social sciences, but also health, medicine, and natural sciences. One of the most notable is his appointment by President Obama to the National Science Board of the National Science Foundation, which advises Congress and the President on national science and engineering policy. He was awarded the University of Michigan's inaugural Distinguished Diversity Scholar Career Award in 2017, an award that now bears his name. The James S. Jackson Distinguished Career Award for Diversity Scholarship. The primary goals of this award are to help us build a more robust body of knowledge and teaching in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, while addressing disparities in contemporary society. To elevate these research foci nationally, to provide important recognition to scholars whose work may have been undervalued in the past, and to create a permanent tribute to those who have made significant contributions to scholarship, teaching, and service in issues related to topics such as diversity, inequality, and justice throughout their careers. With this award, we recognize faculty who exemplify our highest ideals and who help make the University of Michigan a great institution. It's now my honor to introduce Dr. Enrique Nablet. Dr. Nablet is one of the nation's leading scholars in the area of racism and health and is a professor of health behavior and health equity. His research has been funded by the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, the William T. Grant Foundation, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Among the many awards and recognitions he has received, Dr. Nablet was selected as a recipient of the Society for Clinical Child and Adolescent Psychology Distinguished Career Award in 2022. In 2021, he was named the inaugural recipient of the National Institute of Mental Health James Jackson Memorial Award. Dr. Nablet, it's my pleasure to invite you to the podium to introduce our distinguished diversity scholar.
Thank you, Provost Macaulay. All right, I am honored to have the opportunity to introduce they say you're not supposed to have a guru mentor, but if there is such a thing, Rob is mine, this afternoon for the James S. Jackson Distinguished Career Award for Diversity Scholarship Lecture. In 2021, the American Psychologist issued a call for papers titled Foundational Contributions of Black Scholars in Psychology to enhance the visibility of the contributions of scholars of African descent to the field of psychology. There were many emails exchanged. Everyone wanted to write a paper about Rob, which is a great thing. And it didn't take long before we all agreed that Rob needed and deserved to be a part of the special issue. So we got together, unbeknownst to Rob, drafted an abstract, and once the abstract was accepted, worked over several months to write the paper. Once the paper was accepted, we surprised Rob with the paper on a Zoom call. Several people in the room were on that call. And by the end of the call, there was not one dry eye. We laughed, cried, snapped, clapped, shared stories like many of the ones that were shared earlier today, and we gave Rob the flowers he has earned and deserves. In the paper, titled "Standing on the Shoulders of a Giant, The Legacy of Robert M. Sellers," we wrote, Robert M. Sellers, most known for his influential and highly cited multidimensional model of racial identity, is one of the most prolific and foundational Black scholars in psychology. From racial identity theory development and measurement to conceptual and methodological innovations in studying the lived experiences of Black people, Sellers' scholarship centers on the lives of Black communities. Sellers' mentorship and contributions to the professional development of scholars and professionals of color have supported and catalyzed new intergenerational knowledge building by these scholars, ensuring a perpetuating and far-reaching legacy in psychology. We wrote the paper in 4 parts, kind of talking about Rob's contributions to racial identity, literature, racial socialization, innovations in methodology, and the final section, which was about his mentorship and leadership. And we concluded in the paper that Sellers' scholarly contributions and mentorship have transformed the discipline of psychology and the social sciences, making him one of the most influential psychologists in the modern era. I thought long and hard about what I would say to introduce a man who needs no introduction, a man who would be the first to tell you that he has learned far more from his students than any knowledge or wisdom he imparted to them, and a man who would probably rather we get on with the program and not read a list of his accomplishments. Most of what I thought I would say, you've heard, for those of you who were here earlier or watching online, you've heard about Rob's humility, his generosity, his kindness, his selflessness, how he taught us to think, how he's opened doors for so many of us, how he's a consummate strategist, team player, and so on. I could tell you about the first time, or one of the first times I met Rob in East Hall nearly 25 years ago, and how my armpits were drenched with sweat following a discussion of the MMRI. Or the time that I informed Rob I was not going to apply for the NSF postdoctoral fellowship because there wasn't enough time to do so, and he had something else to say about that. Or the times Rob reminded me with encouragement that every paper has a home. I could tell you about countless individual meetings and calls and lunches where Rob imparted invaluable lifelong lessons like what you've already heard today, or as Tiffany mentioned, the countless times that I too have asked myself, what would Rob say or do? So what can I say that hasn't already been said? Rob Sellers taught me without saying a word about possibilities. Representation matters. As a Black man, I didn't see many people in the halls of academia who looked like me. And the few I did see didn't seem nearly as kind or generous or smart or gracious or humble as Rob did. Like many of us, I often doubted myself and wondered if I had what it would take to succeed. When I entered graduate school, I definitely had not thought about becoming a professor, but Rob showed me the way without ever saying a word. I saw someone that looked like me who showed me by example how to do excellent research, advocate for others, put others first, treat others kindly, and through example, and maybe even unknowingly, I knew that I wanted to be like Rob when I grew up. When I doubted myself and wasn't sure if I had what it would take, it was his example that allowed me to believe that I could do it because he had done it before me. One of my most treasured gifts is an hourglass clock that Rob gifted me when I graduated. The inscription reads, "To whom much is given, much is expected." I think I was probably a little scared when I first read that inscription. But it is a reminder that has anchored me, reminded me of what's at stake, and kept me going even on days when I don't want to keep on going. And on the days, even now, when others knock at my door and ask of me to do things I'm not sure I can do, or I'm not sure I have what it takes, I pause, take a deep breath, and I'm reminded about Rob's example, or reminded through Rob's example and experience and courage that I've got this and I have what it takes. So thank you, Rob, for all these gifts and expanding my possibilities. Thank you 1,000 times. We, Sellers mentees, the Black community, and the field of psychology and diversity science and scholarship are all the better, not only because of your giant scientific contributions, but also your outstanding mentoring and wisdom. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Robert M. Sellers, James S. Jackson, Distinguished University Professor of Psychology, sorry, Rob, and Professor of Education at the University of Michigan and awardee of the James S. Jackson Distinguished Career Award for Diversity Scholarship.
Please. Oh my gosh. This has been an unbelievable day. I had an over-under of 5 cries, and I'm already way over that. And I'm not sure that I'll get through this talk without at least another 5 cries. I am, as they would say, full with regards to the wonderful things that have been said. I wish I knew this guy that they was talking about, because he sounds like a hell of a guy. But mainly, I am full from seeing my students, my friends, my colleagues, and seeing how just truly blessed I have been in my life, and it's an amazing day. So, I think I'm supposed to be giving a talk today. And despite the fact that I have known that I was supposed to give this talk probably for more than a year, I only finished the last slide last night. And I though knowingly titled this talk Musings about race and racism, and I wanted to talk about it from 3 different areas that I've experienced in my life. As an African-American man, a psychologist, and a former chief diversity officer. But I titled Musings for a purpose because I thought musings sounded a little bit better than ramblings. And what this talk will be is probably more like ramblings, but I'm hoping that there will be some themes that pull it together. Before I go any further, I also want to take this moment to thank the wonderful team at NCID and Liz, a long time friend, for their incredible help and support in this, and Catalina and the other wonderful folks at ODAY for making this truly one of the very best days of my life. And I just want to thank you so much from the beginning of this. It's amazing for me personally to be here and to get this award. If you live long enough and don't piss too many people off, every now and then people will give you some things just because you've been around so long. But I have been blessed recently to have had a number of opportunities to be honored with a connection to James. And as was stated earlier by Lori, just a brief description of who James Jackson was and his impact not only in the Black community, not only in social sciences, the health sciences, any sciences, et cetera, in mentoring students, et cetera. But James was a hell of a mentor. And to have my name in any way associated with James is just a tremendous honor, and I am incredibly thankful. And James was my mentor, those many years ago, when I first came on campus in 1985. I was told explicitly when I left Howard that I needed to look up James Jackson. I was told that in part because back then my advisors at Howard had an opportunity to play ball with James, and that maybe I'd find some good basketball along with it. But I got there, I think, just after James had gotten hurt and had sort of stopped playing. But he had been a mentor, a trailblazer, a friend, a confidant for throughout all of my time. And there are a lot of different things that I learned from James. Oh, y'all like my high top fade, huh? There are a lot of different things that I learned from James, and many of the things that I learned from James were also reinforced from things that I've heard from others, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But 4 lessons that were extremely important to me was the first was that you have to always have your reach exceed your grasp. What I mean by that was when I looked at James, James never thought about, well, could it be done? It was always, well, it needs to be done. When I think about things like the first national probabilistic study of Black Americans in the early 1970s, as an assistant professor, who thinks of that? Who has that big of a vision? And that was James. All the time that I knew him, James was way ahead of the rest of us. And it was that vision that drove us. The second thing I learned from James was you got to know the rules of the game. If you're going to win, you need to know the rules of the game. You need to know people, but you also needed to know what were the underlying bases, what was the underlying factors, the underlying ways in which things work. If you're playing basketball, but you think you're playing football, you're going to foul out. And James taught me that. The third thing was that it takes a village. James always had a posse. James was always had something for everyone. Even with that vision of the long game, the big picture, James believed he could do things that no one else could because he always knew that it wouldn't just be him doing it. And that he had folks that he could count on. Folks like Cleo and Woody and Rob and so many others with PRBA, Phil, and knew that he could do it. And perhaps most importantly, Tony, that they could make a difference in ways that most of us would never have. And then the last thing, and this was the thing that was particularly important to me as we sort of both got older as I sort of matured into going from a student to being a faculty member and even a more senior faculty member of the career, was how much family mattered. As I've often joked, James Jackson was the most busy man in the history of psychology. He was a James Brown of psychology. And we were in ISR late at night, many a time on different things in different spaces. But James was never too busy to brag about his girls. He was never too busy to let you know how happy he was in terms of his family. And so that was something that was important to me. He was never too busy. He never forgot where he came from in terms of his family and what role that played in his life and what meaning that provided. So I'm amazingly grateful to be here today to accept this wonderful, wonderful award. So now I'll go ahead and start my talk. And again, think musings about race and racism. And first from the perspective of an African-American man. To give this talk, I have to start first and foremost with my family and my story a bit. So I grew up and was raised in a nice home in Cincinnati, Ohio, by two amazing parents that I'll talk about a bit, with two interesting brothers and a wonderful sister. I say that with my brother Danny in the room. That was for you. And I learned so much about the world based on that upbringing. So we grew up in a neighborhood where we were the first black family in the neighborhood in the early 1960s. And someone said, ugh. In reality, though, it was, in many ways, an idealistic neighborhood, in the sense that everybody got along, because all we cared about was sports. There was almost all boys, and all we did was play football, baseball, basketball all year long. And everybody liked and respected and got along well with each other. I thought, in many ways, this race thing is kind of interesting. Because at the same point in time, while I had friends of many different races, well, actually not many different races, two different races, because back then that's basically what we had, was two different races. But I also understood racism and understood structural racism and how racism plays out in the world. And I learned much of this through my parents and my parents' work and my family and watching my family and how structure played out. And I'm going to share with you two stories that are particularly salient with regards to how I learned and understood about race. Can you all hear me? Okay. So the first story, and my family's out there, they're going to giggle a bit, is the story of Lummy Jenkins. And Lummy Jenkins plays an important role in my family's life. So this is my father as a teenager. He grew up in Wilcox County, Alabama. If you were wondering where Wilcox County is, it is in between Selma which is Dallas County, and not too far from Montgomery. But not a whole lot in Wilcox County. And they had a sheriff, a legendary sheriff, named Lummy Jenkins. So think Bull Connor without a gun. And my father tells a story how he was courting. For those of you who don't know what courting is, he was dating a young woman. And Wilcox County was a dry county. And he was driving, he and this young woman, to Dallas County, to Selma. Since he was a minister, he said to pray, but again, Wilcox County dry, Dallas County not dry. You do the math. Anyway, so on the road to Selma, Lummy Jenkins and some of the good old boys in the community were known for, on Friday nights, going out on the road and pulling over black folks and beating them up. That was a good Friday night fun. And my father tells a story. He was driving, he gets pulled over, and folks were about to have a little fun and beat him up. But if you can imagine, 17, 18 year old, you're out with a date, I'm not taking a boat. So this could get really dangerous. 1940, really dangerous. And so they pull him out, and he's balled up, and it's about to go down. And he hears a story, Lummy looking over and saying, wait a second, who is that? Who is that? Who are you, boy? Who are you? I said, I'm Richard Sellers. I said, oh, he's one of them Sellers boys. Leave him alone. He's crazy. He's all boy crazy. He's fine. Leave him alone. And so he remembers he would talk about getting back in the car and drive it back. And whenever he would tell the story, he would always have this little laugh that, that night I was glad to be one of Lummy Jenkins' niggas. And that story was always I can't say the word, was always very informing to me for a number of different ways. One was it brought a sense of racial danger that was not in my life at that particular point in time. That my life did not necessarily mean anything in a particular situation and context, and that could happen at any point in time in a different place in the wrong place, wrong situation. But the other thing that taught me was the way in which he could look back on what was a painful, I don't know what I would have done or could have done had I had that situation, and with a smile that only can be characterized as, yeah, but look at me now. I made it. I survived. I've gone through. And a sense of humor in which to understand this kind of trauma that we experience all the time as Black folks. That I never saw when I read the literature in psychology and understanding who Black people are. So that was one story. My mother's story is another thing that taught me about what race is. So my mother was a flat-out genius. So people have heard me say this. The one genius that I have met in all these years in academia with some really, really smart people was my mom. I'm obviously a little bit biased, but that doesn't make me wrong. So my mom was reading at 2. My mom graduated from high school at 16, and they had wanted to skip her another grade. And she went to one of the toughest high schools that I'll talk about in a minute in the state of Ohio. And my mom later went on to be a nurse, and then from being a nurse to founding a health center, the neighborhood health center, basically from scratch in the inner city neighborhood that she grew up in. But she was an absolute genius. But I didn't find out until years later that she had really wanted to be a doctor. Again, 1940, growing up in Cincinnati, Ohio. She had wanted to go to Meharry. And the local NAACP came to my grandmother and said, "We need your daughter." The University of Cincinnati School of Nursing was what they're called now, but it was the old General Hospital School of Nursing in Cincinnati, had never admitted a black student. And when they were confronted on it, they said, "Oh, well, we can never find one that can pass the test." And so they asked my mom to go take the test, and she was the first black graduate from the University of Cincinnati School of Nursing. So her dream of being a doctor was deferred because of her race. But in this case, a racial obligation. And yet, and this is the part that I always have to remember, is that she did far more as a nurse than what she ever would have done as a doctor. And I forgive me, any doctors out there, but the fact of the matter is she did far more, she helped far more people as a nurse and understanding what it means to be a nurse and the perspective of care versus the perspective of healing are two very different things. So, again, you're talking about an individual in me who has been incredibly blessed with regards to my parents. I've also been incredibly blessed with regards to my education. I would argue I've had the best education ever. And that best education has provided me as an African-American man with opportunities that the vast majority of African-Americans do not get. So I'm very clear about the privilege and the fact that I am unbelievably fortunate and beholding to so many others. So I went to the famous Walnut Hills High School, which is the same high school that Kathy Berlew went to, that my mother went to, which is literally one of the best public schools in the country. Started in the 7th grade. We had to take 3 years of Latin, Sursamad Singing. In my graduating class of 327 people, 324 of them went on to college right away. The other 3 went to Europe and went later. So that's the space. And what I learned there and the doors that were open to me are unbelievable. But what scares me to death when I think about it is the only reason why I got there is because I happened to do well on a test in the 6th grade. If on that day in the 6th grade I had a stomach ache, or I
was thinking a little bit more about recess than I should have been. All of the educational opportunities that I had go way down. Way down. Because the educational opportunities for all the kids who look like me, who didn't go to Walnut Hills, were very different. So that's one space. Then again, the Lord was looking out for me and sent me to Howard University. The real HU, the only HU. And Lord knows I went to HU for all the wrong reasons. But again, the Lord looks after fools and kids. I'm not sure which one I was. But when I got to Howard University, I got an opportunity to experience up close, personal, day in, day out, the breadth of a Black experience. Black folks straight off the street, Southeast DC, Black folks from rural Arkansas, Black folks who were fifth generation graduates from Palos Verdes, California, Black folks who were literally princes and princesses. Hopefully, Black folks who would become president. That's a whole other story. Cool. But for the first time in my life, while I was at Howard, no matter what happened to me, it could be the way someone treated me. It could have been because I'm from Ohio. Could have been because I played football. Could be because I had a high top fade. It didn't matter. The one thing I knew, that I was being treated that way because of who I was and not because of my race. And that was the first time where I lived in that particular experience. And then I left Howard University, came to the University of Michigan. And the University of Michigan was an incredibly nurturing experience. And I have to give all that credit to the Black Student Psychological Association. They're the ones that came to Howard, graduate students, go to different universities, came to Howard, actually gave me an application to the University of Michigan. Now, that's back in the day before internet. And when it was time to fill out applications, since I had one from the University of Michigan, I filled out one for the University of Michigan. I didn't know much about Michigan other than the fact that I grew up in Cincinnati, and therefore I rooted for Ohio State, and they were the team up north that was to be booed, etc. Since then, I'm an example of redemption. I see the light, and I appreciate that. But at Michigan, I already mentioned James, but I got an opportunity to see what could be, to dream big, to see what the possibilities were in different spaces and different places. Now, I want to take another moment to talk about some of my educational mentors. And Kathy, you're first up on the list. Now, there's a whole lot of other folks that should be on here, but I'm going to have to narrow it just with regards to time. So, Kathy plays a particularly important role in my maturation. So, I thought I pretty much knew I wanted to be a psychologist, probably going back to the 6th or 7th grade. I had no sense of what a psychologist really was, but I used to watch the old Bob Newhart show. And, you know, Bob Newhart seemed to have a nice life. I'm nosy, so listening to other people's problems seemed like that could be fun. Plus, it didn't look like he had to do a whole lot of math, so it all seemed to fit in. So that's what I thought I would be, a psychologist. And my mother took me one day to a community center that were honoring folks in Cincinnati who actually two folks who were graduates now of the University of Michigan. And Kathy was one of those individuals. And Kathy was the first psychologist, a black psychologist, that I ever got to see and got to touch and got to know, oh, it's possible to be this makes sense. And Kathy not only did that, but she may not even remember, she allowed me the opportunity to get experience in research, passing out pamphlets and passing out surveys. I studied on alcohol back when I was still a high school student. And so Kathy played an incredible role early on. Kathy was the person that I came to when I was trying to think about where to go for graduate school. And Kathy strongly advocated for Michigan. But she didn't just advocate for Michigan. She actually set up a meeting with Vonnie. So I met Vonnie right out on the, Vonnie McLeod, right out on the DIAC. And it's those kinds of connections that were Kathy. And Kathy has been a supportive friend, mentor, colleague, and has done this for so many other people. The next person that I want to talk about is Jules Harrell. So Jules was my mentor, friend at Howard. And the Jules story I'll say is that I first met Jules. I was in the hallway my sophomore year, and Jules came up to me and said, yeah, so I understand you got an A in Intro to Psych. What do you want to do? And I said, oh, I want to be a psychologist. They said, oh, okay, well, do you know what you need to do to become a psychologist? And I thought, yeah, well, it's like going to, well, I knew I had to go to grad school. I said, you know what you need to do to get into grad school? And I said, yeah, I guess it's a lot like undergrad. I need to get good grades and pass a test. He said, yeah, but you also want to get research experience. Now, I was a football player back then. And literally, if you ask me any day from 1981 to 1985 and you throw out a time of day, I can tell you exactly where I was. My day was that regimented. I had 15 minutes here, an hour here, but that was basically it. Between class, lifting, film, pre-practice, practice, meeting, film, study hall somewhere in there, and sleep. That was the way things were. And Jules said, look, we're going to make sure you get experience doing research. And he had me come into his lab and made sure that I had time to come in, whether it was for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And later I realized I wasn't really helping much. In fact, I was probably more of a hindrance than I was a help. But that was the way that Jules is. And what I didn't tell you about the story is when Jules came and said, you know, I understand you got an A in psych. What do you want to be? I wasn't in Jules' class. Jules hadn't taught the class. So I started wondering, is it that it was so amazing that a football player would actually get an A? That I was known. But the reality is that was Jules. And that was in the Howard Psychology Department. They took care of their own. They took care of us. They made sure we had opportunity. And Jules, I still, 40-something, almost 40 years later, try to make every effort to get back at least once a year and sit in his office and get renewed. These next two people I'm going to throw together are two folks that are the reason why, one more set of folks who are the reasons why I got to the University of Michigan. And that's Wade Boykin at the top and James Jones at the bottom. So I mentioned I applied to the University of Michigan, and I was not accepted to the University of Michigan. And Wade was a graduate of the University of Michigan. And so Wade called up and said, you know, why didn't you accept our boy? You know, he's got this, this, and this. Why didn't you accept him? And they said, oh, well, we don't have his GREs. He looks good, but we didn't have his GREs. Now, of course, back then, you only took the GREs on Saturdays. In the fall, I was a little busy on Saturdays, so my GREs didn't get it. And they said, oh, well, we're sorry. Unfortunately, we've given out all of our money, you know, and I'm sure when the person was talking to him thought that would be it. And then he said, well, if he has his own money, will you? And they said, oh, sure. Like, yeah, he's going to have his own money to go to. Sure. Well, they didn't know that Wade and James were over the APA Minority Fellowship Program. And they made sure that I got an APA Minority Fellowship. And that's how I got to the University of Michigan. So these are just 4 small examples of all the ways that I have been blessed and been provided opportunities. And there's at least 50 more that I could mention, and there's probably 200 others that I'm not even aware about that made that difference. But it always made it very clear that while one should be proud and one should be confident in one's ability and one's belief that they belong, one should never get so cocky as to believe that if you're the first, that you are somehow the best. Nor should one be so worried about whether or not an opportunity given means that you're not deserving. Because I know there were a whole lot of other people that didn't get in who were better than me that look like me. So if I got in because of what I look like and I'm good enough, I don't care. All right. So the second thing that I think is important that I'm going to spend some time talking about is from the perspective of an African-American psychologist. And one of the first things that I learned that I think is extremely important is that all research is me-search. So when I was coming up, people would say, don't focus on me-search, think about theory, think about da-da-da-da-da, but what you're doing, you're interested in this group or you're interested in looking at that question is really because it interests you. It was it was meant as a put down that science should be objective, that you should have nothing at stake, that you should be able to look at it from a perspective where you're 10 feet away. That's a bunch of crap. First of all research is me-search. All research is based on our own experiences, whether it's theoretical physics or intergroup relations, whatever. It all starts with our own experiences that lead to the kinds of questions that we ask, the things that we value in that particular process. And so it's important that we understand that from the beginning. And particularly those of us who worked on humans. Because unfortunately, our science has not had the benefit of all the different experiences that are associated with what it means to be human. And as a result, it, in and of itself, is impoverished. So your experiences mean something. So, as was stated in one of the earlier panels, so eloquently by my good friend Rod James, if you see and you read stuff that don't sound like your experience, it's not for you. It's problematic. It's not just limited, it's wrong. So we started off our work with all research is me search, which got me back to the very first question that I was interested in from a psychological perspective was, why is it that Black folks die so young? I remember sitting in Dr. Varel's office and just talking. And we were trying to figure, I forgot who had just passed, but someone passed again in their 30s. And we're trying to figure out, why is it that all the Black folks in know keep dying so young? And that was basically the question that I was interested in for all these 40 plus years. And the way in which I tried to do this work was to try to understand the role of race in the lives of African Americans. And we started this off looking at African American racial identity. Because I figured, in my naive theorist approach, that there had to be some individual differences because all the Black folks that I knew were very different. They were not this homogeny, because in the literature, the research literature, basically back then, the only thing you knew about Black folks was the impact of stigma on their lives, or as stimuli for evoking interracial attitudes from white folks. But they didn't really talk about or capture in any way the humanity, the variation, the verve that was consistent with the Black folks that I. So in our work on racial identity, that really came out of trying to capture that heterogeneity in terms of how Black folks think about themselves in the context of race. And that led us to develop a model, and I'm not going to spend much time talking about it. It's the multidimensional model of racial identity, where we wanted to capture how Black folks think about race in terms of the significance that Black folks place on defining themselves in the context of race, and then the meaning that they attribute. So what do they think it means to be Black? And anyone who's been to a Black barbershop or hair salon recognizes that folks vary tremendously across those various questions. And we wanted to study it in a way that also didn't just think of Black folks as unique or something different, but that Black folks were human and as part of the larger, broader human experience. And so just as it was important to understand what the existing literature said about human identity and how it played out, it was also important for us to be able to contribute our ideas to how racial identity is a way to think about how other humans also think about themselves. Over the years, we looked at racial identity and a number of different outcomes. We found it associated with everything from racial composition to the race of their best friends in terms of demographics. We started off looking at college students, HBCUs versus predominantly white institutions, through college GPA, alcohol use, almost a Dr. Seussian list of different ways in which racial identity was relevant. that led us to also begin to think about, well, where does racial identity come from? A big part of that is racial socialization. As was pointed out in one of the earlier panels, that Black children often learn about the meaning of race, at least one of the first places, is with their parents. The example I gave you in terms of Lummy Jenkins and my mother's story were foundational notions to my understanding with regards to race. So we wanted to look at how racial socialization worked. And we looked at the different content of the kinds of messages that parents provide, everything from racial pride messages to barrier messages, egalitarian messages. But we also recognize in thinking about being authentic that actually sometimes in the Black community, you get negative messages about what it means to be Black. Sometimes they're explicit and sometimes they're not. And we wanted to look at self-worth, the extent to which you have messages that tells you that as a Black child, you are still of worth. That work really across a number of different areas, first and foremost, noted that messages that parents say that they give to kids are not necessarily the same as the messages that children provide. So we were early on looked at both parents' messages and children's messages. The existing literature often operationalized racial socialization from one perspective or the other, and seeing that there was some congruence. Our work suggested that there's not a whole lot of congruence, and I would imagine just about every parent in this room is like, yeah, you mean you actually got some grant money to study that? I could have told you that before. But yes, we did, and yes, you were right. We also wanted to see what were different factors that went into predicting what messages parents provide us. Factors that were associated with the parents, so what kinds of attitudes do the parent have? What are their experiences and current experiences with regards to racial discrimination? What are their gender? Looking at gender racial socialization messages, marital status or family status. We also were interested in child factors in terms of birth order, also the age of the child's racial identity. So again, hearing messages, you may hear one message if you have a particular schema for race, that you would hear a different message with a slightly different schema, even if it's the exact same word spoken. We then looked at how racial socialization plays a role in predicting a variety of parent and child outcomes. Again, well-being outcomes, academic outcomes, and even racial identity outcomes. And then last but not least, we began to study more how racial socialization plays out at the daily level. So historically, questions were, over the past month, as year, tell us how many questions, or tell me what messages have you provided your child, and then looked at it related to longer term outcomes. With the fact of the matter is, most of us don't live that way. We live to day to day, and when we ask folks what are the general questions you have, that introduces an opportunity for even more presentational bias. When you ask on a day-to-day basis, what messages did you get today? And you ask kids, what did you hear today from your parents? You see a great deal of variation. And you see, again, not a whole lot of matching up. So you have parents who are like, yeah, so we talked about race today, and I told them that you should be proud of being Black, and that you should watch out for discrimination, and you should treat people like you want to be treated, and then you look at the child and they say, nope. Or in some cases, parents say, I didn't really say anything, and the child talks about those. So that's a lot of the work that we did with racial socialization. And then with the racial discrimination work, this was a way of beginning to get back to that very first question, because the racial identity and racial socialization really came out of and trying to understand why Black people die so young. I never thought that was the answer. That was just going to be a part of the model, that variation was going to play, and that the existing approaches to defining Black racial identity were limited in terms of the ways in which the folks that I actually knew. And so the discrimination piece is the one that we were actually looking to get to. And in that particular context, you could categorize or racial discrimination work in three ways. First, again, obvious, but not documented up until relatively recent. Racial discrimination in the lives of African Americans tends to be ubiquitous. That, whether you're talking about adolescents, when you're talking about parents, you're talking about college students, etc., they all report experiencing particularly racial hassles on a far less than trivial level. And those reports are also consequential. They have import in terms of psychological well-being, in terms of educational outcomes, and also in terms of health and health-related outcomes. And last but not least, it's also complicated. Our work indicates that it's not just a one-to-one basis, and that African Americans aren't just passive victims of racial discrimination, but that African Americans are able to cope. African Americans are able to reframe and find lots of ways that buffers the impact of discrimination. And at the same point in time, some attitudes, some behaviors may also exacerbate the fact. And so it's complicated. So that's basically our work in a nutshell. 3 take-home points that we've basically tried to do across all these years of research is that African Americans are not monolithic in the way in which they see themselves in the context of race. Again, now it's laughable when I put this up. But 30 years ago, not so much. That it has implications for their psychological functioning. Again, it's not just interesting to look at or cool to look at, it's important. And then last but not least, again, it's complicated, it's complex. And because it's complicated and complex, it requires us to have more complex theorizing, more complex methodologies, more complex thinking if we're actually going to do justice to these experiences. All right, I am way behind, so I am going to go through light speed. Another area that I have been incredibly fortunate and blessed with is my students. Over the years, yes. As an artist, I have been incredibly blessed to have a group of tremendous, outstanding students who I have been fortunate enough to not mess up too much during their time with me. They have been the sustaining factor for me in so many ways. I'm so proud of all the things that they have accomplished and the ways in which they are currently moving the field. if I can take any credit whatsoever for being here and for getting this award, all of that credit has to go to this tremendous group of students who I've had over the years work with the Sellers Lab. And a incredible part of that is Wah Nguyen, who's been my partner in mentoring and nurturing so many students through here for these years. I want to thank Wah for that support. So the Sellers Lab there's a whole lot of stories about them that I could talk about. Some of them they shared, they got their side. I didn't get a chance to get mine. And Will. It was an amazing scene where you learn, as I had mentioned earlier to someone, I started off as a 26-year-old new assistant professor, not knowing much about the world and feeling like I was in a world that was very different and foreign to me, and flying very hard with a goal of making sure I didn't mess it up too bad with my students. And I thought about all of the positive experiences that I had prior, as well from my parents, etc., as well as my experiences on what a good team looks like, or what a bad team looks like. My athletic experience was incredibly important. And all the credit that they give me really should go to them. Because if there's one thing that I did do right, was we were able somehow create culture of cooperation where each person helped each other out. And I'm sure every one of my students here would agree, and if they wouldn't, if they thought about it, they learn far more from each other than they get from me. And because of that, I learned far more from them than they could. So all that credit goes to them. From the Sellers Lab, I got an opportunity to do something that was a lifelong dream of mine. That moved into the good old CISBIC, Center for the Study of Black Youth in Context. This was something that I had been talking with this great group of folks for many, many years. Having the opportunity to work with people that have similar values, who care deeply, whose work you respect tremendously, who you like as people, and more importantly, love, was the greatest experience that I had in my entire life, and an opportunity to build something where we had a chance to not only do good research, but to also hopefully help train the next generation of folks to move forward. And so CISBIC has been a major part of my life. Unfortunately, administration began to pull me away. They didn't get a chance to do quite as much as I would have liked to have in that space, but I just wanted to acknowledge that opportunity. And now, even though I don't have much time left, I'm going to have to pull my key and go forward. Sorry, Catalina, my apologies. Because I just have to say. So I got the opportunity to be Chief Diversity Officer here at the University of Michigan. And I was the third person in a role similarly related as a vice provost related to issues associated with what we call now diversity, equity, and inclusion. On the left there is Lester Montz, and next to him is Chuck Moody, who was the first, and then there's myself. And when I first got asked to do the job, I called Dr. Moody. Dr. Moody was also like a mentor of mine during graduate school. And if you know Dr. Moody, all language was colorful language. And he gave me two pieces of advice that I have tried to incorporate everything that I've done in this particular context. The first one is, remember, Rob, it took the University of Michigan 200 years to get to be this way. And it's not going to change overnight. In other words, understand, do not allow for people to put on you expectations that are completely unrealistic to the larger problems that occur. So, context of DEI, at least in terms of the strategic plan perspective, is 8 years old. Again, University of Michigan, been here for 200 years. We're not going to change all the problems in 8. Second thing is make sure they make them do their job, as they are not willing to give her. Listen, do not do their job for them unless they're going to give you their salary, and they ain't going to give you their salary. Now, as you read both of that, you can put the colorful expletives wherever you can. And our goal in that was to make sure that DEI isn't something that sits in the provost's office, in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It's everybody's responsibility. Everyone's responsibility. And if most folks were doing their job in the context of what we're supposed to be, we'd have far fewer problems. And it can't be fixed from one central space. Two things that I learned from Lester. So over the years, I watched Lester closely. Two things that I learned over the years from Lester. First, building institutions. You have to build things that are going to be there long after you're gone. That fixes that are just short term don't work over time. Again, one of the earlier panelists talked about the generational shift and struggle that this actually plays. Second thing that Lester taught me was that help every individual that you can. So I mentioned SISBIC. So when we got the grant for SISBIC, I was sitting and talking with Lester. We got this big grant from NSF. And I was telling him what we were going to do about it. And Lester said, oh, well, we should be cost sharing with you on this. The University of Michigan, what you're doing sounds great. We should be cost sharing. So I'm going to go to the provost. We're going to cost share on the center. And Lester did that for hundreds of folks. In our case, 1 million plus, but in other cases, and he said, look, we do this all the time. All right. So let me jump in. We started the U of M DEI strategic plan. The goal of the plan was nothing less than institutional transformation. We knew in the back of our minds that even though it was a 5-year plan, this wasn't going to change in 5 years, that it was the beginning in a similar way that we've just celebrated the kickoff of the Capitol campaign. 5 years provides a nice time in which to look at where we are, provides a space for us to evaluate what we need to prioritize things and to also galvanize us. But it doesn't assume that at the end of 5 years, everything's going to be solved. I promise you, at the end of this at the end of this capital campaign, there will be another capital campaign. And so we wanted to build DEI in the same way. There were some fundamental goals and values that were associated with it. And the ones that I want to really point out is empowerment. The DEI process is by far the most inclusive process of any kind of major university activity that I've seen at the University of Michigan in my 30 years now at the university. We ask students, we ask faculty, we ask staff to develop the plan. They had input because we never wanted it to be the president's plan. We didn't want it to be the board's plan. We didn't want it to be the provost's plan. But it was a plan toward the University of Michigan. And as wonderful as we are as leaders of the university, we're not the University of Michigan. And so at the bottom is empowerment, and at the top is institutionalization. And we wanted to make sure that this was an institutional space. I started off talking about this in part because I wanted and I need to address what's happening now, both nationally but also here at the University of Michigan. Fact of the matter is, DEI is under attack. I must admit, I have never been big on conspiracy theories, so I never bought into the man. So it might have been my social science training that everything's multiply determined, etc. But there is a very, very organized, well-funded group that is working hard to encourage not only folks that we would consider more right-wing, and I don't really believe in the left-right space because it breaks down real quickly when you start looking at different kinds of things. But not only for those that you would normally think, but quite frankly is targeted more towards the moderate and liberal folks that we would have fought in the past. Those who were tired of the Senator after the racial reckoning of 2020 said, okay, yes, we flogged ourselves enough. Now DEI is not too far. This is actually meaning that I have to make some sacrifice in my life. This attack is anti-evidence-based, so evidence doesn't matter. And unfortunately, it's also being incredibly effective. It intentionally misrepresents what DEI is. It never actually explicitly defines DEI. In fact, it just throws out DEI. After a while, you don't even want to say diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because who really wants to be against equity? Who wants to be against inclusion? You could make an argument for diversity these days, given where we are, but you don't want, so you just say DEI. They ran this with CRLT, critical race theory, or CRT, CRT. Often you hear it's an effort to indoctrinate students into an extreme leftist woke ideology. Its most effective tool is dividing groups against each other. So by not defining what DEI is, whatever your personal boogeyman is, that's what you think DEI is, and therefore you're against. So whatever grievance you have, it's because of DEI. That's the leaf. Some of its tactics include using outlying incidents to define what DEI actually is. Using anecdotes, colorful anecdotes, sometimes true, often not, in many ways exaggerated, but never looking at it from both sides. And it selectively, or when it uses data, it selectively does it, and it often misrepresents the data. Some of the examples of the misrepresentations that we've heard is DEI is antithetical to or suppresses free speech. I would first argue, if you don't have diversity, what good is free speech? Because we're all saying the same thing, then what good is free speech? And in fact, the whole argument underlying DEI is the notion that we benefit from diversity, and the only way you can benefit from diversity is if you have diverse sets of ideas that are allowed to share. So it makes no sense, but yet it has been thrown out there. That our schools are overrun with DEI bureaucracy, that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of us, like we're some kind of communist commissar controlling people's minds and not allowing people to say certain things and promoting only other things. I haven't seen them. And when I was chief diversity officer, if I knew that we had all of these commissars, I would have had some of them come and rake my leaves at the house. It's only for certain people, oftentimes Black and Latinos, because we often look at race. In American society, race is a great place to start dividing people up. But de-emphasizes other work that's being done. And the latest piece is that DEI excludes Jewish people, that somehow DEI is inherently anti-Semitic. And it is, again, completely and totally contrary to what DEI is. Our data actually show, our data actually show that the group that reported engaging in the most DEI relevant activities were Jewish. And if you know anything about the Jewish people and Jewish people history, that's not surprising. And the idea that they're somehow conflated or contradictory is not only offensive to DEI, quite frankly, it's offensive to Jewish people who know their history. Now, I know, out of time, but I got to do this. I'm sorry. So, recently, we at the University of Michigan had the good fortune of being victims of a New York Times Magazine hit piece. And I can't describe it any other way than as a hit job. The article makes three major points, at least as I dissect it. First, it attempts to constantly say DEI efforts at U of M are unpopular. So if you look at the way the article is constructed with faculty and students, they give a number of different descriptions of interviews with different constituencies and give you the sense that everybody is mad at DEI. That it is not only not been helpful, but it actually hurts people in their experiences, etc. And they brag about the fact that they interviewed 60 people. Now, University of Michigan, students, faculty, and staff, over 100,000 people. But they brag about their 60 people. Okay. Well, I don't quite understand how in that entire long article that they presented not a single quote or fact indicating any positive support for DEI, the U of M community. I just thought, by accident. See, well, data, going back, quickly looking at our DEI climate data from 21, we asked the question, compared to the climate at the start of the DEI strategic plan in 2016, how would you rate the current DEI climate? We asked students, we asked staff, we asked faculty, using a probabilistic sample with incredible response rates. And what you see is, in terms of students, almost 10 times as many students report seeing the climate as being much better. Even faculty, 6 to 1, much better. Staff, roughly 6 to 1. How big is that, again, going back to my stats players? 16 people sampling from this pool. How do you end up with nobody having positive experience? Either you cherry-picked your sample or you left out some quotes. We asked the same question. How satisfied are you with the progress that has been made as a result of the 5-year plan? And again, students, roughly 4 to 1. Staff, more than 4 to 1. Faculty, even faculty, as a faculty member, 2 to 1 positive. I guarantee you, Lori, I'm sure, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but if there was something that we got 2 to 1 faculty in favor of our diploma sources, we would have been doing handsprings. But yet, you got the article that you got. The second thing that you got out of the article is that DEI at U of M is an expensive, bloated bureaucracy. One of the things they are happy to point out that when they got from this top secret memo that was only supposed to go to regents, but they somehow got, that, U of M spends $236 million on DEI. Now, I'm not going to lie. I would like to have $236 million. But understand, this is over 8 years. And they left a couple of things out. First, the University of Michigan has an annual operating budget of approximately $14 billion dollars. So roughly, we're talking about 0.2% of the annual operating budget. That would have been a nice thing to contextualize the number. Also, they left out that a significant portion of those funds was for the Go Blue Guarantee, something that we're incredibly proud of. Student financial aid. And I should note, the Go Blue Guarantee provides a great deal of opportunity with regards to affordability and making Michigan more affordable. It has made it a model such that all across the country, numerous universities have copied the Go Blue Guarantee. Understand the Go Blue Guarantee is a DEI initiative. It began as a DEI initiative. It is a DEI initiative, but doesn't get put in that context. And one should also note, given the over-focus with regards to race, is the majority of students who are benefiting from this are white. It's not a problem. You would expect it, as the majority of poor people are white. But still, none of that's in the conversation or in the article. Oh, the good old U of M has 241 employees, so they reference the work of a good friend up the road, Mark Perry. Now, if you look at Mark Perry's work, he fails to note that across the 3 campuses, there's more than 56,000 faculty and staff employees at the University of Michigan. So that 241 employees represents roughly 0.4% of the university. That would have been nice for them to put in. But it would have also been nice for them to recognize how poorly the methodology that they used actually was. They said, oh, well, we're going to count the number of individuals who have either diversity, equity, and inclusion in their title. And then that's the number. And so this is supposed to be some estimate of the workforce and the cost. And the assumption being that, oh, see, they hired 241 new employees at the university just to run diversity, equity, and inclusion. I wish that was the case. Actually, I would advocate for that to be the case. But the fact of the matter is, most of the folks were already here doing it. Because the quiet little secret is that we've been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion since, at least since I've been here, I know long before that. It's just folks who are getting recognized for the one, they didn't have a type. And also, this isn't the only work that they were doing. Like, this is not 241 folks who have 100% of their effort. It would have been nice if they'd looked at an FTE, but that might have been too much to ask. So the reality is, given what we're trying to do, we actually would count that number as closer to 56,000 folks who should be doing work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Actually, this slide, I'll move forward. Last but not least, is that they attempted to make the case that DEI at U of M has not been effective. And this was the one that probably hurt the most. Because they attempted to cherry pick one particular case, problem, challenge that we're working on in terms of Black student enrollment. All Black students out there in a way that I don't think the Black students wanted to be out there. And made it the case, like, see, it's not working. As if, A, they cared about them in the first place, that they had any kind of notions of what should be done, because at no point in the article did they saying what should actually be done with regards to helping Black students. But yet they wanted to use them to denigrate the work. And it's interesting that that was the only place they looked. They didn't look at the wonderful work that has happened and progress that's happened with regards to accessibility and the work with our disabilities community. A whole host of areas of progress. I want to thank O'Day for providing this data and these slides for me to be able to use today, and the postings that they've done from their reporting and their website. And also the work to be done. So the university is actually working on and looking into potentially developing a center examining disability experiences, so that we move from a place where we're trying to accommodate to actually include, to understand, to provide opportunity, to benefit from members of our disability community. If you want to just focus on race and you just want to focus on representation, again, not perfect, but you see a whole lot of arrows pointing up with regards to the direction of the diversifying of the University of Michigan, whether it's faculty, staff, or students. Didn't present any of that data in the article, but did want to focus in one particular space. And the challenge with regards to Black student enrollment is real, is important, and is something, again, that we have been struggling with since before 1969, when the demands were first. So, 200 years? Fixed overnight. No. We've only had a small time at it. And there's evidence that progress is being made. There's evidence that DEI is actually working even in this space. I don't remember seeing that in the article. And it's important to understand that these things didn't just happen. They're a function of a number of programs that many of you have started, efforts, changes in policies and practices and procedures and approaches that have occurred. One example, Wolverine Pathways. Roughly 20% of all African American students who are in state came through Wolverine Pathways, a DEI program. Allison A. Collegiate Fellows. Oh, and they didn't talk about them as scholars. They didn't talk about them as leaders in the field. They didn't even mention the fact that even though I have real problems with it, the fact of the matter is that most of the incoming faculty in their LS&A Collegiate Fellows were coming from more prestigious universities and had greater credentials than the rest of the faculty. But you didn't get anything about how outstanding those faculty are or how important that is in terms of moving forward. So, we as the University of Michigan are at a crossroads. We are blessed to be a place where people all around the country are looking at us in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are proud Wolverines, and we love to say we are leaders in best. Well, now is that time. Time for us to put up or shut up. It's time for us to speak up, to be very clear about our stories, our experience, our support with respect to diversity, equity. There are forces that are pushing the university in a direction that is not consistent with my long love for this institution. And I've never seen it this strong. But I can also tell you, I have never seen us this strong.
This is driving me in.
As has been said before, every time you make progress, history teaches us that there's often a backswing. Now the question is, are we going to meet the moment? Are we going to make it very clear what we, as the University of Michigan, are going to do and what our future is going to look like. So with that, I want to thank you all for listening. I want to especially thank the many friends and family that I did not mention that I've also been incredibly blessed with, and those that are here and were able to come. You mean so much to me. I want to thank my folks in the Department of Psychology, the Provost Office, my O-Day folks, and now Impact folks for all the support and all the caring and all the dedication that you have shown and made my life so much better for knowing you and working with you. And of course, Tabby, where are you, Tabby? I can't see the lights. Where is it? You have been. You've been my rock. You've been my savior, my biggest supporter, my best friend, my inspiration, my thought partner, my critic in the very best way, and most importantly, you have been the love of my life. I'm sorry now. All right, if I'm going to do this, and Lori, ever since I was a graduate student, I have loved this room. I've loved Fourth Floor Rec. But there's always one thing that I had hoped back in the day when I was once sort of an athlete, was hoping that I could one day actually get a wave. Just kidding. That's all right. Thank you.
So, in addition to the traditional plaque that will be presented to Dr. Sellers, each year that we offer the James Jackson Award, we also invite Michigan students to propose and create original artwork to be presented to the recipient. And for the 2023 award for the Art and Design competition, the winning design was created by Kayla Greatness Price. In a minute, Catalina is going to show you the art that Kayla created. So Kayla Greatness Price graduated from the School of Information in May of 2024, earning a Master of Science in UX Design and Research, and she recently completed UX design contracts with the Health and Justice Informatics Lab and O'Day. So I would like to invite Kayla to the podium for a minute to tell us about her inspiration in designing and creating her artwork, which is titled Free?
Hello, everyone. How are you today? Good, good. Just a moment. Like a true millennial, I need my technology to start my speech. All right. It is my honor to present my art piece, Free, to Dr. Robert Sellers, in recognition of the James S. Jackson Distinguished Career Award for Diversity Scholarship. This piece was inspired by celebrating Black American culture by honoring our roots. The two main messages my digital artwork exemplifies are we're thriving still in ways that white supremacy could not kill. And the second message is, after all, we come from ancestors of greatness. We must live to honor them. These two phrases are exemplified in this work because the 5 faces shown are actual imagery of 5 generations of my maternal lineage. Ascending from the very top is my great-great-grandmother. Her name was Mary Ellen. After Mary Ellen is my great-grandmother. Her name was Freddie Lee. She was the mother of 22 children in Louisiana. The third woman is my grandmother, Edna, from the amazing Detroit, Michigan. And she had 14 children. Can you imagine that? 10 girls and 4 boys. And she raised them with a 3rd grade education. Next, of course, is my tremendous mother, Carla, who was raised in Detroit, Michigan as the 13th out of 14 children. She has been a nurse for 40 years in Detroit, and I've had the honor, of course, of being her youngest child and her only daughter. And then lastly, of course, is me. This is me sitting on my grandmother's lap, actually. I took that picture and I created it with thousands of edits with this digital artwork and collage. And so I'm truly honored to present this art piece regarding the memorialization, recognition, and respect of Black American lineage, celebrating our triumph just from being here. To Dr. Robert Sellers, an appreciation for his tremendous and groundbreaking work within our community. If everyone could please join me in thanking and showing gratitude to Dr. Robert Sellers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kayla. Your design is a wonderful representation of the legacy of our ancestors and the promise of future generations. And that's a beautiful and fitting way to honor Dr. Sellers and his distinguished career as a scholar, a mentor, and a leader. James Jackson was a beloved mentor and an extraordinary scholar who touched the lives of many. His academic legacy will continue in the work and lives of his students, as well as in the work and lives of the recipients of this award. And I want to take a moment just to recognize James's wife, Toni Antonucci, who is also a distinguished member of our faculty in the psychology department. And we're really glad to have you here with us today. Like Dr. Jackson, Dr. Sellers exemplifies our highest ideals of what we strive to do as a research university. We work to strengthen knowledge and learning to serve the state of Michigan and society as a whole, and we seek to create a campus that's welcoming and supportive to all, because we understand that the convergence of students, faculty, and staff of every background leads to better research, teaching, and learning. This is the work of the University of Michigan, and it's the work of Dr. Rob Sellers. So I would like to now invite Provost Lori McCauley to the stage to present the University of Michigan's James S. Jackson Distinguished Career Award for Diversity Scholarship to Dr. Robert Sellers.
Rob, thank you for your musings. At times amusing, but totally heartfelt, the whole presentation. And I'm not surprised you went over a little bit, but I must say I enjoyed every minute, so thank you. So I'm going to read this. The James S. Jackson Distinguished Career Award for Diversity Scholarship presented to Robert M. Sellers in recognition of significant contributions to the understanding of diversity and addressing disparities in contemporary society, University of Michigan. I think we have a photo.
Thank you.
And with that, I believe we Oh, you have more words. Okay.
I wanted to thank everyone for being here, whether they're here in person or remotely. And if you are in person, I want to invite you to join us at a reception that's right through these center doors in the Assembly Hall. And there will also be a book there where you can send your wishes to Rob, so please take a minute and do that as well. Thank you again.